Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, it's Dallas week. We're taking one final look at the matchup with LOE3. Three-player props I'm going to bet on Sunday night. Plus, is Jalen Hurts going to be better than Dak Prescott? And a second reunion in Philadelphia with DeSean Jackson? All that and more on another edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Friday edition of the show. Today's podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. I'm Louis DiBiase. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day on every podcast platform available Monday through Friday, on YouTube as well, and on Twitter at Locked On Birds and at DiBiase LOE. It's a Friday edition of the show. Today is the last podcast until Eagles-Cowboys Sunday Night Football. The Eagles are 5-0. The Cowboys are 4-1. We sat down yesterday with Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys. Gino and I took a deep dive into the matchup on Wednesday. All of our shows, again, posted on all podcast platforms and on YouTube, so go check out those videos. Lots of previews for a massive matchup, the biggest one since 2019 when it was the burn the ships game, right, as Zach Ertz so beautifully put it, that win or go home for the NFC East battle. This one is not just as big because it's not late in the season, and this win's not going to dictate if you win the division or not or make the playoffs, but it's very important. If you lose this game, even at 5-1, you're second in the division. And the Cowboys have Cooper Rush playing at quarterback right now. Dak Prescott could be the guy in the later season matchup in that Christmas Eve battle. So this is a game the Eagles want to take advantage of, get to 6-0, heading into the bye week, get that home win against Dallas, and then get all these guys healthy. It looks like on the injury report right now, things are looking good. Jordan Mailata was a full participant. Even if he can't go, Andre Dillard looks like he'll be ready to start at left tackle. Avonte Maddox is going to return in the slot after 2 weeks missing those games with an injury. Josiah Scott, I thought, filled in really nicely, but Avonte Maddox, those first 3 games, was having a career start to the season. I thought he was the best slot corner through the first 3 weeks of September. So I think this matchup is going to be very exciting to watch on both sides of the ball. Again, I think I said on the show Wednesday or Thursday, maybe both, I don't remember the last time both the Eagles and the Cowboys, number one, were this good heading into a matchup with each other, but also the collective amount of talent both teams have, the star power on both sides of the ball that both of these teams have. Could not tell you the last time both teams had that. Maybe you have to go all the way back to 2014, even maybe farther back. Is it the Vic, DeSean Jackson, McCoy, Macklin Eagles against the Tony Romo, Des Bryant, DeMarco Murray, Miles Sanders, Jason Witten-led Cowboys? Honestly, when it comes to a collection of talent, that's probably as far back as it goes. A lot of talent in this game to watch, and also a lot of talent to bet on. So we're going to get into this week's LOE3 presented by the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's Bet Online. So each week, if you're new to the show, me and my co-host Gino Camilleri, we go through 3-player props each that we want to bet on for this Eagles game. Last week, we finally both finished over 500 for the first time all season. I went 2-1. Gino went a perfect 3-0. As you can see now, Gino's 8-7 on the day. On the season, he really needed that week to get over 500. I'm still crawling back, 2-1. Still 3 games under 500, but I plan on winning you guys some money with my 3 bets this week, trying to crawl out and get back to 500 here. It's always tough to bet. It is, as Gino always likes to say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So here are 3 bets that I'm going in on in Eagles-Cowboys and 3 bets that Gino's going in on. A lot of similar ones, I would say, theme-wise, but we don't have, for the first time, I think, in weeks, we do not have a same bet that we're making. So here are my 3 bets that I'm placing for Eagles-Cowboys on Sunday night. Number 1, I'm taking the over on Quez Watkins receiving yards at 13.5. Quez Watkins has hurt me in a lot of bets this year so far. I think I've bet on Quez 3 of 5 weeks. This would be 4 of 6. because I love the lines, the odds that Vegas is giving us. I mean, only 13.5 receiving yards. That's the over-under for Quez Watkins. I guess it's fair considering in 3 of 5 games, he's had 0 receptions and 0 yards. And last week against Arizona, he only had 3 catches for a grand total of 19 yards. But 13.5 receiving yards for Quez, honestly, even if I keep losing, eventually I'm going to hit on that bet because Quez Watkins, while, yeah, he only has 5 catches to his name this season, he's averaging only a catch a game. He's averaging 17.6 yards per reception. So the over-under is at 13.5 receiving yards. Really, all I need from Quez is one big catch. Not even one big catch, but one typical Quez Watkins play. And I feel like this is the game, like the Minnesota game week 2, where Watkins, yeah, he might not get 10 targets and 9 catches, but this is a game I think he can make a much bigger impact. The Dallas Cowboys like to play a lot of man coverage. They like to play light boxes. They like to play single high safety. They like to blitz. They like to roam around the formation. They like to be aggressive in Dan Quinn's Seattle Seahawks Legion of Boom like style of defense. And I feel like that bodes well for A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. But Quez Watkins is the one guy that's never going to garner the matchup against Trayvon Diggs. So that's the big thing with Watkins on the inside. I feel like he has the big mismatch here. And again, the line, even if you only think Quez is going to have a catch or two, I'm going to bet 13.5 receiving yards every single week. I mean, give me that. And I know it's been tough for Quez Watkins guys this season. I'm one of them. But I think it's going to start to get better here. I think he's going to start to get more chances down the field. I like last week they got him implementing, they started to implement, I should say, the screen game more with Quez to try to neutralize the blitz. With the way Dallas attacks the quarterback, I feel like that can still be a theme this week. So I'm going to hammer the over on Quez Watkins. My second bet, Miles Sanders over 1.5 receptions. He has had that over his hit in 4 or 5 games. And that's, I've been on fire with that bet this year, not just with the Eagles, but most weeks when I'm betting on NFL games, I don't know why, but one of my favorite things to do this year is to bet the over on a running back with receiving yards because these lines are so low. On Monday night, for instance, Josh Jacobs, it was 21.5 receiving yards, nailed that over. The Saquon Barkley over in London last week hit. I've bet this same bet with Miles Sanders 3 times this year, and I'm 3-0 with it. I think Miles Sanders, especially if Jalen Hurts is going to get the ball out of his hands quickly to neutralize Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, I think Miles Sanders is going to garner a couple checkdowns at least, maybe some wheel routes down the field. They still really haven't used him in that way. I'd love to see that, but I'm having a lot of luck with the running back receiving yard overs, so I'm going to keep hitting that with Miles Sanders, receiving yards and receptions. This one I'm going to take is receptions with over 1.5. And then my third bet, Jalen Hurts over 1.5 passing touchdowns. Yes, he only has 4 passing touchdowns on the year. But number one, I see Cowboys fans talking smack on Twitter like that's any indication of who Jalen's been as a passer this year. Absolutely not. If you want to know who he is as a passer, go look at PFF's grades on Jalen. Go look at the fact that he's increased his completion percentage by over 6% this year, despite his volume significantly increasing. He's on pace for over 4,500 passing yards on the season. His 4 passing touchdowns is not a reflection of who he's been as a passer. The only reason he has 4 passing touchdowns is because this team is such an elite rushing attack in the red zone with not only Jalen, but behind this offensive line with Miles Sanders and Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott and Trey Sermon, that why would you go away from that when you're inside the 20, inside the 10? I don't think those numbers reflect his performance at all this year as a passer. And like I said with the Quez Watkins thing, I think Hurts is going to have an opportunity to make some plays down the field like he did in that Washington game in week 3, those one-on-one battles. I think he's going to get a couple passing touchdowns here. It has to go up eventually. You know what I mean? There's just too much talent on this side of the ball in the passing game, and he's throwing the football too well to be having 0 or 1 passing touchdown every single week. It's not an easy matchup, but I think he's going to hit that over. As for Geno, he went with Jalen Hurts 21 or more completions. He went with Miles Sanders 16 or more carries, and then Quez Watkins 2 or more receptions. Again, LOE is presented by the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is Bet Online. Coming up next, right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, I've been thinking about Jalen Hurts a lot especially heading into this Dallas Cowboys matchup, although he's not playing, I started to compare Jalen Hurts with Dak Prescott. And I feel like the stories are very similar. And I started to think 3 years into Dak Prescott's career versus 3 years into Jalen Hurts' career, who do you think had the higher ceiling at the time of that third year? We'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And guys, today's episode of LOE is presented by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. All you got to do is head over to linkedinjobs.com, then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. We thank you so much for making this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles your first listen today, and LOE is your first listen each and every day. Also, make sure to check out our NFL key predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL. Locked On's local experts, including myself, give you the inside scoop on the 5 biggest games of the NFL weekend, including Sunday and Monday Night Football, plus betting advice from the field's leading experts at BetOnline. Follow NFL key predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. We are taking one final look at this giant battle on Sunday Night Football between the undefeated 5-0 Philadelphia Eagles and the surging 4-1 Dallas Cowboys. Although it is Cooper Rush playing in this game, I started to compare Jalen Hurts a lot to Dak Prescott this week because I feel like the stories are very similar, right? I think it makes sense. Jalen Hurts was selected in the second round to be a high-end backup to your already cemented franchise quarterback. He was mobile. He had a high floor, very good leadership qualities, arm strength. You know, the questions, that is where they arose, and also just overall arm talent. The ceiling as a passer is why he fell to day 2. I feel like that was a very similar situation with Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys back in 2016. Tony Romo was still the franchise quarterback in Dallas when they took Dak Prescott in the 4th round. Dak was supposed to be a high-end quality backup with a lot of mobility and an okay, good, not great arm, a lot of good leadership qualities. He actually had, I remember doing that draft process, the evaluation process back then. I remember comparing him, and a lot of people gave him comparisons to, the likes of Donovan McNabb. And honestly, Jalen Hurts has gotten similar comparisons. Jalen Hurts himself has gotten the Dak Prescott comparison a lot. When people ask you, how good can Jalen Hurts be at the NFL level? This topic came up a lot in 2020 and 2021. Like, what's the best case scenario for Jalen Hurts? And a lot of people said it's Dak Prescott. So these stories kind of go hand in hand. And it's kind of funny, the Eagles almost got their Dak Prescott in a way after years of going back and forth with that whole Carson Wentz versus Dak Prescott debate. Wentz didn't work out, and now it's almost like you replaced him with your version of Dak Prescott. It's kind of interesting how that story worked out in the NFC East. So I want to talk about that. Is Jalen Hurts, is that his ceiling in the NFL? Is the best case scenario for Jalen Hurts is that he's Dak Prescott? When Dak Prescott was in year 3 versus Jalen Hurts in year 3, who do you think had the higher ceiling? And to me, honestly, I think Jalen Hurts' ceiling is going to be higher than Dak Prescott. I think if you look at Dak Prescott in 2018 compared to Jalen Hurts in 2022, I would probably pick this version of Jalen Hurts versus Dak Prescott. Is Dak Prescott, was he the better, more developed passer at the time? Most likely. But Jalen Hurts, as we've said on this podcast for weeks now, he has taken that step. I mean, he is an early MVP favorite. It's him. And then it's the best of the best. It's the big 3. It's Josh Allen, it's Patrick Mahomes, and it's Lamar Jackson. So Jalen Hurts has taken that similar step as a passer. Honestly, Dak Prescott, I want to even change what I just said. Dak Prescott in his first 2 years, 2016 and 2017, a much better passer than Jalen Hurts was in 2020 and 2021. But the step Jalen's taking this year, honestly, I feel like it took Dak longer to get to that level. And I think although Dak Prescott in his first 3 years before that really serious ankle injury a couple years back, although Dak Prescott was a really good mobile quarterback heading into the NFL, coming out of Mississippi State, that was one of the ultimate strengths of his game. It's why the Cowboys believed in him in the 4th round. It's also a huge part of why he was able to elevate that team when Tony Romo went down. Him and Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield, those first 2 years, they're shells of themselves now when it comes to running ability. But those first 2 years, they were unstoppable in the running game. However, I think Jalen Hurts right now is a generational mobile quarterback. The impact he's having in the red zone, rushing touchdowns. No quarterback in his first 25 career starts has had as many rushing touchdowns as Jalen Hurts. He's on pace this year to shatter Cam Newton's single season rushing touchdown record in a single season from 2011. Jalen Hurts, too, I think is a more dynamic runner than Dak Prescott was. I feel like he's more Russell Wilson in this way, or I don't know, he's a combination of Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson where he makes the first guy miss almost every single time. The footwork he has, the ability to cut on a dime and make guys miss. Dak Prescott was not nearly as elusive as Jalen. And he's got the power of Jalen Hurts Josh Allen, where Jalen Hurts, the first time a guy wraps him up, it's going to take multiple people to get him down. Remember that play, that rushing touchdown on Monday Night Football against the Minnesota Vikings? It took 4 or 5 guys to get Jalen down, and he's pedaling backwards into the end zone, and he still got in. Dak Prescott was a powerful runner in his first few years, and he was very dynamic, but I don't think he was the same guy as Jalen when it comes to making people miss in the open field and when it comes to his power running style. I think Jalen's on another level. The arm talent's very similar. They have a lot of the same intangibles. They were both very good as runners, and it's very close. Dak Prescott in his first 3 years versus Jalen Hurts in his first 3 years. But I think I would take Jalen Hurts. I think this version of Jalen Hurts is better than that version of Dak Prescott, and I think his ceiling is higher. Honestly, if we're going to compare him to a quarterback that has similar qualities that we've compared him to in the past, when it comes to best case scenario, I think Jalen Hurts is closer to being elite level Russell Wilson than who Dak Prescott has been. I think his ceiling is higher than what Prescott has been. Dak has been a lot of the time seen as a top 10 quarterback. So maybe I'm being too optimistic talking about Jalen, which is very ironic considering my reputation. But honestly, yeah, I think I would take Jalen over Dak for sure. Honestly, I can't believe this is what I'm talking about. I mean, it feels really good. This is the best crow that I've ever eaten. Just the other day, I was on Twitter, and I think of like my 12 tweets that day, 8 of them were hyping up Jalen Hurts in different ways. And I'm thinking, man, is this 2019 Lou all over again? By the way, I started to think about Jalen too and the MVP step he's having right now. And I'm measuring it on the scale of 2017 Carson Wentz. Because as I mentioned, Hurts is right now an MVP candidate. It's him, it's Josh Allen, it's Patrick Mahomes, and it's Lamar Jackson. So, I'm comparing him to the last time the Eagles had an MVP-like quarterback breaking out in his second or third year, and it's Carson Wentz in 2017. And I started to think, is Hurts truly having an MVP-like breakout season? Well, I compared him to what Carson Wentz, I went week by week. Week 1 in 2017, week 1 in 2022. Who has the advantage? Who is better, Wentz or Hurts? Week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. I went through that process yesterday. And right now, through their first 5 games in their breakout seasons, Wentz in 2017, weeks 1 through 5, Jalen Hurts, 2022, weeks 1 through 5. I have Hurts and Wentz pretty much at a deadlock of how they looked. Hurts, I think, won 2 games compared to Carson. Carson was better in 2 games, and then I think they had 1 draw. So Hurts compared to 2017 Wentz through 5 weeks, 2-2-1, 2 wins, 2 losses, and 1 tie. I think he's right on pace with where Carson was. Now we know the tear Wentz went on after winning 9 straight games. We'll see. Hopefully Jalen didn't peak and he's coming downhill. Hopefully he's going to continue to get better. But honestly, he's right there with where 2017 Wentz was through those first 5 weeks of his second season. And it's incredible to see it. Hopefully it continues this week and a new test for Jalen. It's the first big matchup he has against the Dallas Cowboys. We'll continue to get into it. Coming up next right here on Locked on Eagles. Guys, today's show is sponsored by the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is the sportsbook that brings you LOE3 each and every Friday. It's BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you find. And it's not just the NFL. It's not just betting on the future of Jalen Hurts, maybe for MVP, betting on the over this week for receiving yards for Quez Watkins and receptions for Miles Sanders. But you can bet on the entire NFL. You can bet on college football. We've got the Philadelphia Phillies right now up 2-1 against the Atlanta Braves in the NL playoffs. You can bet on the Phillies. The Philadelphia 76ers are playing next week. The NBA season is right around the corner. The NHL season, puck drop last night. So hockey's going on. I don't know if you're big Flyers fans that listen to my show, but do you believe in John Tortorella to elevate another not very talented roster? Whether you do or not, you can bet on it at BetOnline. Also, MMA, boxing, golf, everything at the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Head over to betonline.net today on your mobile device or on your computer to learn more about the trends in action, because BetOnline, it's where the game starts. All right, Eagles fans, we are wrapping up this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles. It is Dallas week. Eagles-Cowboys this Sunday night. I cannot wait for this game. The Eagles are wearing green on white. My jersey take on that decision, I think it was expected. The Eagles are at home against the Cowboys. They like to wear green on white. The Cowboys always like to wear their classic vintage white jerseys. Even when they're in Dallas, the Eagles wear green the majority of the time. How many times even, this is for me, the jersey analytics guy, how many times have the Eagles even worn white against the Cowboys in the last 5 to 7 years? The last time I can think they did was 2015, right? The week 2 game, Sam Bradford and DeMarco Murray. Sorry to bring that nightmare back up in your head, but it hasn't happened often. And that's why, although I understand they're going to wear green and white at home, especially on prime time, I like forcing the Cowboys to wear a different jersey than their white jersey. So for me, I would have probably wore white on black again. I would have ran it back with white on black. By the way, they're 4-0 with that uniform, but they wear green on white in this game. Speaking of somebody that wants to wear green on white again, how about Lou DiBiase in 2022 going back to talking about a potential DeSean Jackson reunion? That's right. No, you did not accidentally click on a Locked On Eagles podcast from 2018. DeSean Jackson, after being on the podcast I Am Athlete with Brandon Marshall yesterday, live in Philadelphia, he did a whole Eagles chant. It was really cool. If anybody was there, would love to see some videos of that experience. DeSean Jackson, one of the greatest Eagles receivers of all time. D-Jack's already had his reunion in 2019 and 2020, but Brandon Marshall asked him if he was officially retired. DeSean Jackson said, hell no. He's a free agent and he's ready to go. And he mentioned 2 teams he wants to play for. He mentioned the Philadelphia Eagles and the Green Bay Packers. Now, is this version of Lou DiBiase, this variant, if for my MCU nerds out there, if you will, is this version of me as in on this idea as I was back in 2018? No, absolutely not. If they don't bring in DeSean Jackson, which I don't expect they're going to, I'm not going to be devastated. At the time, why I cared so much is because I felt like DeSean Jackson was not only because I feel like there was unfinished business with him in Philadelphia, and he was my favorite player growing up, but I felt like he was the missing piece. The Eagles, their offense was so compact that they didn't really have that deep threat for Carson Wentz, who, as we all know, it's the biggest known thing about Carson. He loves to force plays down the field. He loves to go for it all. So what better player to get than the greatest deep threat in NFL history, one of the most explosive players in Eagles history, in DeSean Jackson? That's why I was so passionate about getting him back all those years back now. It's been, 3-4 years since I pounded the table for that idea on this podcast. Now, don't care as much because the Eagles are the number 1 team this year in explosive plays. A.J. Brown has the most 10-plus yard receptions in the NFL. You've got Devontae Smith, who's just as good down the field. Quez Watkins is averaging 17 yards a catch. He's a young version of D-Jax. Obviously not to that level, but he's a 4.3 speed guy. That's a very dangerous vertical threat. Jalen Hurts is the 4th highest graded quarterback on throws 15 plus yards down the field. They're not having issues creating explosive plays. They don't need a 34, 35, going on 35-year-old DeSean Jackson to be a featured part of the offense. So I don't care that much if they do it, but I'm not totally opposed to a second reunion with DeSean. The Eagles special teams unit this year has been abysmal in the kick return game and in the punt return game. Britton Covey has not got it done. Quez Watkins is not getting the job done. Anybody they've put back there, honestly, for years now, as you guys all know, it's just been a huge struggle. So I'm in on DeSean Jackson coming back if they just use him as a returner and he's your 4th or 5th receiver. He's, with Zach Pascal, but if he came back, I don't want him, kind of like with the Rams. And I understood at the time because he felt like he still had, gas left in the tank, why he didn't want to be a backup. But DeSean Jackson didn't want to be on the contending eventual Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams last year because he wanted to be more featured in an offense. It's why he went to the Las Vegas Raiders. The Rams didn't trust him to stay healthy. The Raiders really didn't even use him a whole lot either. Despite still having juice, I mean, the guy still pulled off some big plays last year for both the Rams and the Raiders. He wanted the ball. So if he's going to come back, for me, it would only be as a returner. And then, as a rotation player, yeah, if you're going to go empty set and go 4 receivers, I would like to see in a reduced split DeSean Jackson and Quez Watkins next to each other. For sure, D-Jack still absolutely has the speed. And that's why I'm in on this idea of bringing him back. But I want to mostly see it in the punt return game, like old school DeSean Jackson, 2008, 2009, even farther back, Cal DeSean Jackson returning kicks. Because that's the one thing he still does have is speed. And if he's okay in that kind of role, he's not going to cost pretty much anything. He's a fan favorite. I'm in on bringing him back in that way. But DeSean Jackson, we know the kind of guy he is. Not saying he's a me first person. And he did mention the Eagles first. So maybe he is just ring chasing at this point. But it was only a year ago that he wanted to have a bigger role in an offense. So it really does depend. But I'm open to the idea if they were using him for that purpose. I do kind of feel bad for DeSean. That's why I would like to see him come back, because look at where the reunion took place with D-Jax in Philadelphia, right? He comes in to try to put Carson Wentz and that new look offense over the top to get back to the Super Bowl, right? The Eagles were still seen as a contender that was still in that window of being able to win a championship. But he came in, honestly, 2 years too late. The Eagles were on the downturn. That window was closing, and we know it was closing rapidly quick, right? Then DeSean Jackson leaves after 2020, a 4-win season. So he comes in right after the Super Bowl win and the deep run of 2018. And then he gets cut in 2020. The Eagles decide to move on. And it only takes 1 year to get back to the playoffs. And 2 years later, they're back to being a Super Bowl contender. So just really bad timing with D-Jax and his reunion in Philadelphia. So if he wants to come back now, again, if he's a role player and he's not taking snaps away from Quez Watkins, I'm all in on it. But I doubt Philadelphia will be super interested. What do you think? DeSean Jackson reunion part 2? I cannot believe it's 2022 and we're still talking about this. But hey, you guys know me. I'll jump at every opportunity I can to talk about number 10. Let me know on Twitter what you think. If you want D-Jax back in Philadelphia, hit us up at Locked On Birds and at DiBiase LOE. That's going to do it, though, for today's edition of Locked On Eagles. We'll see you after the game late on Sunday night. Sunday Night Football, 8:25 kickoff between the Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. Subscribe to the podcast on all platforms for a show Monday through Friday and on YouTube as well. Hit us up on Twitter, as I said, at Locked On Birds and at DiBiase LOE. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson, they give you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. As always, thank you for downloading Locked On Eagles. Thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.